Howdy folks, Spencer here, and today I'll be taking a look at the stats of the upcoming free 14th anniversary event ship, the Rex Pilot Escort. As always, chapters are listed down below. And before I get too far into things, I do have a couple of notes here. Given that this is going to be a very popular ship, especially with some of the accessories it has, I am going to be doing a proper review for it after release, which means that for this video, I am going to be skipping over a couple sections that I would normally include in the stats breakdown, specifically all of the customization options, the comparable ships that we have in the game already, and for the build side of things, given that this is a free event ship and one that's going to be very popular, I am going to be doing a separate build video for it where I go over a few different builds and show some gameplay with the different builds you could possibly put on it. And next up, I want to go over the process of how you can obtain the Rex Pilot Escort for free from the Kings and Collective event, which is running during the 14th anniversary. This event starts on PC next Tuesday, January 23rd of 2024, and for those of you over on console, it'll be starting up on March 12th. Now, to go through and complete this event, you need 40 progress, but you can only earn 2 every 20 hours, so basically 2 every day. So that means you need 20 days of progression during the month that the event is running. There's a few different options here. You can play the Taken by Surprise episode and get 2 points from that. You can do the Scorpion's Abyss episode, get 2 points from that. Or alternatively, if you don't want to do the story missions over and over, there are some TFO and minigame options here. So you can earn 1 point from doing Guillotine, the Battle of Wolf 359, or the Omega Particle Stabilization minigame. Now, if you wanted to go in and do 2 guillotines back to back, that would work for your daily progression. So would going in and doing 2 of the Omega Particle Stabilization minigames back to back. So you can mix it up or do the same thing if that's more convenient for you. And on the customization side of things, again, I'll be going over this a bit deeper with the full review. But for now, I do have a couple things from the 10 forward that I can share. The first is that the Alliance logo on the top of the ship cannot be removed. Even if you put a vanity shield on the ship, it is going to remain in the exact same spot with the exact same colors. As you can see on screen now, with that vanity shield, there's another vanity shield, and it's there no matter what. And Thomas did also say that the ship should not be kit bashable with any Defiant or Jem'Hadar attack ship parts, which is unfortunate but understandable given the blended design the ship has. And for those of you wanting to see the ship from a few different angles, I have another couple of pictures here on screen, and here's a bit from the 10 forward where you can see it in combat, just to see what it looks like when you're actually flying it. One thing I liked, and you'll see it in a moment when he turns, but there's this red engine there, that red engine line, I like that. The one bit that I personally am not too fond of is that blue up on the top of the saucer bit there. But I imagine we'll be able to cover that with some vanity shields, or at least change the color of it. But unfortunately for most of the 10 forward, it was hard to get a good shot of the ship because the UI was blocking it. Again, we're less than a week out from this, so I imagine you'll see myself and other creators playing around with it next week and flying it around, and you'll see it in a bit higher detail. And heading over to the stats side of things, this ship has 5 forward weapons, 2 aft, and an experimental weapon slot. It has 3 device slots, 2 engineering consoles, 4 science, and 5 tac. So this is not a ship that you would want to put isomags on, but if you have the old Spire locators or exploiters, they would work very, very well on this ship. And there was some confusion because there was a quad cannon on the build that Kale was flying. The ship does not have a quad cannon. There's no AP quad cannon with it. Rather, what happened is when Kale loaded the ship, it brought over some of the weapons from his existing ship, which was the legendary Bordesque. So that's why there's quad cannons on there. Those are the ones off the Bordesque that were in his inventory. The ship will come instead with stock AP weapons. Nothing special there. It does have the Alliance Wingman mechanic, which I'll talk about in a minute. And it does have pilot maneuvers, even though it doesn't have a full pilot spec seat. And on the stream, it did have a cloak, but it looked like it was just the normal cloak. So that can basically be ignored. And for the bridge officer setup, you have a commander TAC, a lieutenant commander universal, lieutenant commander engineer with pilot, a Lieutenant Tactical with Merrick Worker, and an Ensign Science. I'll be going over this bridge officer setup a bit more when I get to the build video here in the next couple of days. This is going to be really good for energy weapon platforms, but if you were hoping to use this ship as like a torpedo boat, it's not really going to do very well in that role. This is a ship that's going to be better suited for like beam overload, fire at will, cannon scatter volley, or cannon rapid fire. And next up, I want to recap some of the unique features that this ship has, starting off with the pilot maneuvers. This continues a trend that we've seen since the 2023 summer event, in which they're giving the event ships access to the full commander specialization abilities, even if they don't have a full commander spec seat. So we saw with the Hesperian back with the summer event that they gave it access to the intel abilities, even though it doesn't have a commander intel. We saw it with the Temerian, where it got the command inspiration abilities, even though it only had a lieutenant commander command. And we're seeing it here on the Rex, where it is getting the pilot maneuvers, even though it only has a lieutenant commander pilot. It's a way for them to increase the value of these event ships without making them the exact same effectiveness level as a traditional C-Store ship. And the other mechanic here is the Alliance Wingman, which is a new take on the Vanguard Wingman mechanic that you see with a lot of the Jem'Hadar ships. So in this case, with the Rex, the Wingmen are going to be another pair of the Rex escorts that will follow you around and listen to your commands in combat. They are always there, and you can either synchronize the commands to give them both the same orders, or you can have one go on the offensive and the other play defensively. So you do have options, and these things are always going to be there around you. So if you enjoyed that mechanic with the Jem'Hadar ships, you'll enjoy it here. And honestly, this is a really great value for new players, because these wingmen have traditionally been very, very powerful for leveling up new characters especially. They'll basically go in and insta-nuke most enemies at a low level. So definitely another reason, if you're a free-to-play player especially, to go in and pick this ship up, because those things are going to help you out massively when working on low-level characters. And moving over to the accessory side of things, I want to start off by taking a look at the experimental weapon, the Inertial Polaron Shunt. It's a bit weird that this is Polaron, given that the Alliance ships traditionally have been very anti-proton focused, and even the little wingmen that you see fly alongside the Rex, those are also shooting anti-proton. So I get why Polaron's there, given the Jem'Hadar ties to the ship, but it is a bit weird given the AP theme of everything else with the Khitomer Alliance stuff. Now, this being Polaron based should be able to be boosted by plus Polaron buffs on your build, so if you're running a Polaron setup, this is probably going to be an interesting experimental weapon to mess around with. And the nice thing about this is that it will fire faster based on your ship speed. However, in order to max it out at 200% firing cycle haste, you need to be at 180 speed, which is not great. The issue with that is that in most endgame situations, you typically want to find a nice spot to park and focus on a group of enemies. Traditionally, the DPS mindset has been that if you're doing figure eights or you're doing circles around a target, you're probably not going to get as much damage on the target. So this is encouraging a playstyle that traditionally has not been as effective as just sitting still. But if you're someone that likes to fly around and stay at a high speed most of the time, and you like Polaron builds, then this may be an experimental weapon for you. And against some of the other experimental weapons out there, like the Soliton, it has no shield pen. You can see both of these side by side. The Soliton Wave Impeller is the one that I'm comparing it against, because the Soliton also has haste associated with it, except the haste for the Soliton just scales up based on your engine power. So the Soliton is easier traditionally to get up to a decent haste number, because you just have to boost your engine power up with things like emergency powered engines. And the issue with the Inertial Polaron Shunt again is that you actually have to be moving very fast in order to get that haste from it. And it doesn't have the shield pen like you see on other experimental weapons like the Soliton Wave Impeller. And next up, I want to take a look at the Universal Console Elite Alliance Squadron Beacon. This can, of course, be used on whatever ship you want, and the passives on it are 8% crit severity and 10% flight speed. The clicky is going to summon in 4 Alliance escorts to fight with you for 45 seconds, and upon their arrival, they are each going to unleash some destructive fire, dealing damage 3 times a second for 10 seconds to your target foe and any nearby allies. So it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. Obviously, performance-wise, it's hard to tell with the basic build that they have on the 10 forward streams. So for those of you that have pet heavy builds or lots of summons, I think this is one that you're going to want to keep an eye on once we start testing it here next week. And the last accessory here is the Starship Trait Inertial Supremacy. This is honestly the star of the show. This Starship Trait will debuff foes during AoE weapon firing modes. AoE, area of effect, means fire at will, cannon scatter volley, or torpedo spread. And specifically, weapon attacks during AoE weapon firing modes will apply a damage resistance debuff to foes for 30 seconds, and that debuff will scale up with your speed. So the baseline number appears to be right around negative 27.3, and it caps out at a minus 50 debuff at 240 speed. So like with the experimental weapon, you're probably not going to be playing up near that higher speed level, but even that baseline number, that's not far behind the debuff that you would get from Superior Area Denial or an Attack Pattern Beta 1. So that's pretty important. Debuff is crucial to endgame play, especially with Elite Randoms coming up. This is going to be a trait that is very beneficial for a lot of people. Debuff is allowing you to take down enemies faster. That's why most endgame builds you see that are pushing DPS numbers nowadays tend to run almost exclusively Attack Pattern Beta for the debuff. Attack Pattern Omega and Delta have their uses with some trait interactions, but for the most part, Attack Pattern Beta is used exclusively for the debuff. And this is a trait giving almost the same debuff as an Attack Pattern Beta 1, potentially up to what an Attack Pattern Beta 3 gives if you're flying fast enough. So definitely a trait you don't want to miss out on. And meta-wise, I think this trait has the most meta impact out of anything on this ship. The fact is, debuff, like I've said, is very important, and I foresee this trait potentially becoming quite popular on support and maybe even tank builds. The only question I have with it right now is, how does it stack? Does it stack like Superior Area Denial, where each player running the trait can apply a stack of it to a target? Or is it like Cold Hearted, where there can only be stacks from one player total? So there's some questions about it that could impact how many people need to be running it. But overall, this is definitely a trait that you should have in your toolkit, because eventually you may have a very good use case for it. And to wrap things up, I think that the Rex Pilot Escort is a very strong energy weapon platform. It's clearly not going to be the best, but as an event ship, that was already a given before they even showed the stats. But for those of you wanting to do a beam overload setup, fire at will, cannon scatter volley, or cannon rapid fire, this ship is going to be very capable for any of those playstyles. So if you're a new player to the game, that alone makes this a ship that you don't want to miss. And it also has a strong set of accessories, so even if you're not a fan of the ship itself, picking it up for the accessories is going to be worth it. The console is going to be quite nice on pet builds, I imagine, and the Starship Trait, with the amount of debuff it gives, will be quite impactful, especially for those of you looking to up your DPS to get into the Elite Random TFO system. Having that extra debuff in there is going to be very, very impactful. Again, do not miss picking up the Starship Trait from this ship. And of course, this ship also has the Alliance Wingman mechanic, and the Jemadar version of that, the Vanguard Wingmen, have been historically very good, especially when you're leveling up a new character. They basically go in and annihilate all the enemies at a lower level. So having a free ship that has that mechanic, or a variant of it, is going to be huge. That means that any of you that pick this ship up should hopefully have a ship that you can instantly claim on your brand new characters that will have these wingmen on it, that will then be able to go in and make leveling up a breeze for you. And again, I have a full review that I'll be doing for this ship next week, and I will be doing a build video probably before it's released, just going over the different bridge officer setups that I would put on this for a beam or cannon build. That's going to be it, though, for today. Again, thank you to all channel members and viewers for the continued support. See you guys around.